Hey there, listeners. Well, I had an awesome interview with a guy called Kelvyn Eglington, and the title of this episode is The Ability to Walk in Many Worlds. Now, Kelvyn is currently the Waikato General Manager. That's a sort of a region within New Zealand for Craig's Investment Partners. But before that, he was also for 6 years as the CEO of Momentum Waikato Community Foundation, where he led the development of a 50 million endowment fund. But also, he spent about 12 years in the executive roles for the world's largest mining company. And Kelvyn and I had an awesome discussion about certain things. But you know what? You and I, listeners, and Kelvyn as well, we've seen people who, they talk to certain people. They won't talk to everybody. They talk to people with power and money and things like that. But then there's these leaders, then there's these other people who will talk to everybody, going from cleaner through to the CEO to anyone else, right? They will talk at all levels. And Kelvyn and I had a great discussion about this and about this whole concept as well. So I think it's something for you that you're going to thoroughly enjoy, and listening to what Kelvyn shared in relation to the ability to walk in many worlds. Well, listeners, it's time for you to get into the interview and enjoy.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutsas.
Hey there, listeners. Welcome to the wonderful episode of the Leadership is Changing podcast. Great to have you here with us today. And I've got a great guest with me. His name is Kelvyn Eglington. Kelvyn, a massive welcome to you.
Thanks very much, Dennis. Lovely to be here.
Now, whereabouts in the world are you today?
Currently, I'm in my little home office, which is in Mātangi, which is just outside of Hamilton. So we live on in New Zealand, so the North Island of New Zealand. We're about 2 hours south of Auckland, which most people may have heard of, the big city. And very lucky I live on a little 2-acre block with mature trees and a swimming pool and all those good things. So it's a great place to come back and relax.
Yeah, excellent. And it's a good time of year too, because it's spring going into summer, good place to be.
It certainly is.
Yeah. Hey, okay, so let's give the listeners a little bit more about your background. So you're currently the Waikato General Manager for Craig's Investment Partners, and you previously were 6 years as the CEO of the Momentum Waikato Community Foundation. And then even before that, I think you actually had 12 years in executive roles for the world's largest mining company. So tell us more about that, and tell us more about you and your background.
Yeah, okay. Well, the part of history is I started actually in a sport administration role, and that was years ago after going to university at Lincoln University. But those were all roles that were around strategy, working with people in sport, obviously competitive environment, and worked my way up through that industry. And then was lucky enough to be approached to go and work in a mining company in Waihi in New Zealand. And Waihi is a small town. And if anyone's seen it, if you go on the Google map, you will see that the town surrounds the open cast mine. And mining's been there for 50 odd years. And I was asked to come in and bring that sort of community-based strategic thinking, executive thinking to a mining company, because it needed to develop better community relations and external relations, particularly with its iwi, our Indigenous people of New Zealand. And I brought that skill set. And then over time, that very fortunately took me around the world with Newmont Mining as it was. So at that time, they were the second biggest gold miner. They're now the largest. And that took me to Perth in Western Australia. And from there, I was lucky enough to do work all across Australia, New Zealand, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, and then into places like Ghana, into the United States. And was exposed to working in a multinational and working at the various layers, both globally, regionally, Asia Pacific, and then into different countries, and all of those facets of different cultures, different expectations, different people, and being exposed to all of that was fantastic. And over time, my wife is Māori, so again, the Indigenous people of New Zealand, and we decided to return home after about 12 years. I was based in Jakarta. I was the chief of staff for our Indonesian operations during a time where we were selling our asset on the Sumbawa Island, the Batu Hijau mine. So that was a big job, working through and keeping people calm, but also managing all of the things that happen in places like Indonesia with just keeping the transactions appropriate and working through all sorts of issues. We came back to New Zealand. I spent a little bit of time in local government, which I wasn't built for. But then I was asked to set up what became New Zealand's second largest philanthropic community foundation in the Waikato, and really bring some of that exposure I'd had in mining through the external affairs work and implement that into a New Zealand context. Did that for 6 years. We raised $80 million for a new regional theatre. We worked with government. We worked with lots of philanthropists and funders. We then built an endowment fund of some $50 million, which continues today. And then I was asked to come and work in the finance market. So very, very different sectors, but there's some commonality around sort of leadership, strategy, bringing people together and taking a step change in how we're doing things. And then that's where I am today. And I guess in my spare time, I sit on a number of governance boards, and I'm currently chairman of Surf Lifesaving New Zealand, which is a massive honour and something that's been a big part of my life.
Yeah, that's good. And I think you've just been given some funding from the government. Is that correct, Surf Lifesaving?
Yeah, it's a really interesting time in that sector. So Surf Lifesaving is New Zealand's non-profit organisation, but we have 18,000 members, 74 clubs. We save over 700 lives a year across New Zealand. We patrol close to 90 different locations where we're patrolling beaches. We do preventative services. And it's not the lives we save, it's the families that we keep together. That's really the outcome. And we've had a great opportunity now with engagement with central government that what was largely a volunteer-led organisation, we now turn over close to $50 million a year. We're able to support clubs with their operational funding and delivery. And we're looking to build on that over the next 4 years and start working with our vision as no one drowns at beaches in Aotearoa, New Zealand. But our purpose is very much about the development of great young New Zealanders. And lifeguarding does that. And funny, we talk about leadership, but lifeguarding and all the skills that, well, many of the skills that I bring to leadership were learnt on the beach. They're learnt in emergency situations. They're learnt when you've got to assess risk. You've got to go out and save people in conditions that are pretty freaky. And I firmly believe that Surf Lifesaving develops better New Zealanders and better people. And I think as countries throughout the world, the more we can do to develop better leadership with our young people and expose them to situations that are not normal and help them understand how to operate in those places, I think is just a great testament to what we do. So I'm really proud to be the chairman of that organisation.
And also, I think that's when you're saying about developing those young leaders, or the young ones to be leaders as well, that's really our leadership legacy that you're building too for the future, right? It's going to be our leaders for tomorrow.
Yeah, look, I had the way you've articulated that is exactly what we've been trying to find. And as an organisation, particularly in the governance role, as a chairman, we've got some independent members who are appointed. We have board members who are elected by our membership. And we've certainly worked hard to lift the capability of our governance and our management teams. And it's that fine line between governance and management and ensuring that you can blend that thinking, and that leadership has been a large part of our discussions, because leadership never stops in terms of your learning. And I think when we talk about developing great people, it's very much our focus is on the young people who are on the beach doing the saving, but equally it's about the separate chair people of our clubs, it's the administrators. But we've termed this idea of second tier leadership. And those are the people in our organisation that they're not the chairman, they're not on the committees, they're not on the boards, but they're people who make sure that the equipment is there, the staff are there, the rosters are working, that the delivery is happening. And we often overlook that level of leadership, I think, and we've seen a massive opportunity because those are the people who are maybe now in their 30s and 40s, they've got children involved, they've been a lifeguard, they're not ready to step into sort of key governance roles, but they're still active on our beach. And we need those people. So leadership legacy, I think, is a great term.
Yeah, and I even think they're the glue, right? They help bring that organisation together, which is wonderful. You talked before about the fact that the chair and there's a board and you've got some people that you have appointed. I think the other one is we had a guest on, a friend of yours, Nathan Height, without the E, as he would call it, and as he says it.
Yep.
So listeners, you may have heard that episode as well. So Kelvyn and Nathan know each other. So I think Nathan has just joined the board. Is that correct? Has he just been appointed?
Yeah, Nathan's got a long history, both as an executive and as a lifeguard. And funnily enough, we're even at the same club. But yeah, he's just joined the board, and he's the sort of capability we're looking for. There's someone who runs his own startup company, international, global, based out of New Zealand, got a massive amount of respect for his ability to look at health and safety and risk analysis, which is a large part of what a board does, and to have that skill set on the table, and to have someone who's exposed to that internationally and then be sitting around your board table is quite phenomenal. So no, he's just joined us in the last 2 months.
When you talked earlier on about your background, about going to and work in different organisations, giving you the exposure to work at different levels, different countries, different regions, different cultures and things like that, was there a sort of a common theme that you saw around leadership around the world with all those different sort of geographies, demographics and things like that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. As I said, I think, with the hindsight of wisdom now, at the age of 52, you probably look back at some of the things that you did in leadership and cringe a little bit. But I think being able to be exposed to different cultures, whether it was Indigenous cultures of Australia, the Aboriginal people, or Māori of New Zealand, or even the peoples of Papua New Guinea, and understanding those leadership and how that operates. And there's some amazing stories about being chased with machetes and holding your ground, and understanding that that's a cultural thing, it's not a threatening thing. But having that view of just listening and doing your homework and being prepared and understanding what leadership is in those different contexts. And I think for me, the thing that I've always held on to is something my father said years ago, that you've got to be comfortable working with the man or woman who sweeps the street, and you need to be comfortable when you sit in the Prime Minister's office. And what he was saying is you need to be able to walk in two worlds. But equally, I'm really lucky I'm married into marriedom, so I walk in three worlds. And when you do that sort of work internationally, you need to be able to walk in many worlds. And I think the commonality of that is the ability to listen and to articulate what you're hearing back from people in a way that they can hear that you understood it, and then take that and actually deliver something that is meaningful out of the discussion. It sounds very simple, and I think we have this habit of over-analysing and over-academicising a lot of things in the world at the moment, and leadership's potentially one of those. But the simple things are listening, articulating what you've heard, setting good expectation around what you can deliver, and equally what you can't. So if you can't do that, we've always had this concept of we always find a way to yes. But that may not be that we do what you want, but I just simply don't say no. I'm able to come back with something that is somewhere there, and between us we get there eventually. So look, I think listening and articulating what you're hearing is really a big part of it.
I really like what you just said there about what your dad shared about walking in the two different worlds, and the fact that the way I look at it is, for some leaders I look around the world who are very good, and I'm thinking the Obamas, or I'm thinking the actual Dutch Prime Minister a few years ago spilt his coffee, and the people wanted to clean it up, and he was like, no, I'm cleaning it up, and just how it relates to it. Or when you see the guys give the fist pump or shake the hands of people who are at all different levels within society, I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, look, I think that's right. The ability to be comfortable in different settings. We often talk about this. I'm as comfortable in the marae, been sitting there for 24 years, even though I'm a Pākehā. I'm as comfortable in that environment. I'm as comfortable in the local pub working with the working men as I am sitting when I'm talking to the minister, the Prime Minister, or to the mayor of the office, or whatever we're doing. And that's you only learn that through exposure. And there is a confidence that you've got to try and expand into that space. But I had a great sort of mentor who said it's all about being authentic. That's the new term, but it's really just about being yourself and listening and articulating back what you've heard, setting some good expectations of what you can and can't deliver, and then getting on and doing it, not spending lots of time vacillating around process and issues. It's like, yep, we can do that. No, we can't. And making decisions.
Mm-hmm. Very good. All right. So being yourself, being authentic is the buzzword that we use today. Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Now, you're talking about a few things about these different roles, organizations, but how did you actually get into leadership in the first place?
Yeah, it probably goes right back to school, to high school. And I was at Palace North Boys High School, which is a very traditional boys-only school in New Zealand. And I was first 15 and all those things. But I came from a large family who walked in many worlds, as I said, and whilst that traditional delivery of schooling system was good for me, I always felt it was a bit constrained. There was a world beyond that. And I remember talking to my guidance counselor at the time, a great guy by the name of Paul Pottinger, who's still around today. And he said to me, look, Kelvyn, the world's a bigger place, and you need to be curious about the world the world is not Palmerston North and it's not Palmerston North Boys High. Go and find the world, and out of that you'll become a leader. And really that's what I did. And like people talk about career paths, and I've never been I don't know what my career path is. I'm still not sure what I'm going to be. But I was never one of those people who said, I'm going to be a lawyer, or I'm going to be a teacher, or I'm going to be this. But what I did know is that I felt I had the ability to lead, and I wanted to be in those situations where I could take that responsibility. And that came probably from the schooling and the sport, particularly the sport. And then when I got into Surf Lifesaving, again, going back to that, on a voluntary level, they put you into roles where you take more and more responsibility. And then my work career just followed. I do a job, I do it well, I try and do it to my best of my ability, and that often opened doors somewhere else. And even though I've worked across, like I said, 4 or 5 very different sectors, from philanthropy to international mining and everything in between, there is some commonality about they've always wanted me to step in and lead change and create some sort of change in those places. And that's been really exciting.
Yeah, very cool. That's a great way of doing it too, right? To think about it. And once again, going out there and doing something. Interesting how there's a lot of people that still don't know what they want to do when they grow up. And it's really quite interesting to hear it. But they've gone out and done some wonderful things. And it's actually using it. And one thing you did know, as you said, was you knew you wanted to go out and lead things. But what that was, it was interesting. But it's amazing to look back and join the dots to see what you've actually gone and done. Really, really cool.
Yeah, look, it's really interesting having a discussion on this, because you do reflect. And if there's any commonality to the work I've done, it's been around strategy, taking change and looking at strategy. How do I do that? But I think just about everyone on LinkedIn says they're a strategist. Everyone's got a strategy, because we're just got to think of something that sounds good. But the trick to strategy is using data and analysis and what's happening. But then the trick is implementing it. and I think that's been I went to university. There's a guy, Rick Mansell, he ran a strategic management paper. And it was that one paper that, and I'll never forget this, when sport administration was new in New Zealand, they were looking to do strategy. And I was the only person in our organisation at the time who had a strategy paper, so I became the strategy guy. But again, you take that opportunity and you do the best you can with it, and you research and study, and that became a bit of a stepping stone to understanding, hey, strategy is one thing, but you've got to implement it. And these are the things that work and these are the things that don't. And you've got to think about form follows function, and are you prepared to change structure, move people, change budgets? That's the delivery and implementation. And people they forget that if they're going to change strategy, you've got to do all of that afterwards. So look, that's been a real common part of my leadership journey, and taking on those roles where I could see an opportunity to do things better. And funnily enough, that's how I got into mining. We were living in Whangamata, which is on the Coromandel Peninsula, New Zealand. And I saw an article that there was mining coming up the coast. And I'm a surfer and was thinking, hang on, I'm not sure about mining. But I saw the opportunity to get involved and either change it from within, rather than standing on the outside with placards and all the rest of it. Actually, if I can make change, I'm best to do that from inside. And I'm quite proud to say that some of the restrictions that are in place around the Coromandel now are things that we as a company, and I led, because we knew it made sense for the community and for us as an organisation to put self-restrictions on us as an organisation to enable the business to thrive elsewhere. So sometimes you've got to devolve power, and that's what we were doing. And we were giving things up and being quite open about that, because we knew that what's the point of starting a fight? You're never going to win. So, yeah, look, I'm rambling now, but all of those sorts of things around taking opportunity to lead and make things better, that was the point I was making here.
Yeah. And I like what you say too, because the thing is, a lot of people wait for change to come to them. And I go, no, don't wait for it. Be the change. And you're just actually saying it at another level, which is be the change within and inside an organisation, right? Go into an organisation and be the change. If you don't like something, don't sit there and complain about it. Go in there and change it, and just go out looking at it, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's, again, as I reflect, there's been organisations that I've stepped into that have meant something to me or to my family. I could see the opportunity, and people go, oh, why did you put your hand up for that? Well, I think I can help that be better. And even, like I said, I spent two years in New Zealand in local government, and because I believe that if you get the right government and you get the right elected membership and you get the right budgets and things, you can do great things. And we did do great things, but actually it's still bloody hard in New Zealand to get local government, because the governance aspect of that leadership is it's 13 individuals, so it's really difficult. But that's a whole other podcast, probably.
Oh, it sure is. It could be another episode, that one. Yeah, definitely. Especially if we talk about certain cities. Hey, this person can be alive or from history. Now, who's your favourite leader and why?
Yeah, when you said that through, I struggled to think of one person. But when I think about leadership and what I've learned, I've taken bits from all great people. I had, like my father, the concept about get on with everybody, you'll do well. There was a guy by the name of Ken Tremaine and another gentleman by Bill Wasley. They were instrumental in the formation of the Resource Management Act in New Zealand. And I was fortunate enough to do some work with them at a very young age. And they taught me things like quality of the rescue. Getting things wrong and making mistakes is part of the human experience. But actually how you fix that and focus on the quality of that fix is what takes you forward. We weren't focused on why did it go wrong and who was it and blaming. It was like, let's move forward. We'll always circle back, but actually let's get it fixed first. Things like, hey, the big issue that's bothering you now, if it still bothers you when you're 50, it's probably a big issue. If it doesn't bother you at 50, it won't bother you next week. So therefore, like just little things like that I've taken in leadership and I think usefully have been really applied. And funny enough, the name I actually came up with was Bruce Springsteen. Now, you might think that's really weird, but I've just been watching I'm a big Bruce Springsteen fan. But the thing about Bruce Springsteen, he's not a leader as we probably know him in terms of organisation, but what he's done, he's been completely relevant from the 1970s when he burst on the scene to today, and he's now 75. But I watched a documentary on him just recently, and he talks about the secret to being a good songwriter and to being relevant is to continue to be curious about the world and in the world in which you're operating. And I just think that's so true. And I think for leadership, that's so true. To be curious about the world. And again, I was so lucky to be able to work in different countries and different cultures where you had to be curious because they weren't like New Zealand. Even going from places like the differences from New Zealand to Australia to the United States. Each of those places have a culture and a process and a way of working which is very different. Yeah. And I think if you can be curious about the world in the context by which you're operating, that's where leadership has to be, because change is so, it's not saying nowadays, but change is the only constant. But change is happening all the time. And if you're not curious about where you are, whether it's use of technology, whether it's how Generation X operate, pronouns, all that stuff is just the context by which leadership operates in. And I think the fundamentals of leadership are still the same, right? It's about setting clear expectations, setting clear direction, managing performance, all of those very basic things we know. But the context in which we operate in now, that's the bit that's changing all the time. And I think it's an exciting place to be. Why would you want to be one of the soldiers when you can be out there working? And I think the thing that's probably really clear in that about being curious about the world is leadership's no longer a solo activity. You know, when I was growing up in the 90s, all the leaders you saw, individuals who dragged people along, they stood at the front and everyone followed behind. And now leadership's not a solo activity. Leadership's really about bringing all of that context alongside you and getting their input and understanding that context and their perspective and how do I meld all of that into something to make sense for these people and this organisation that operates in this context. So even though it's not a solo activity, that the All Blacks and rugby here in New Zealand, they talk about the leadership group and co-captains and things like that. And I think that's is true because, you know, from a 52-year-old leader through to our newest 21-year-old fresh out of university, the contextual piece now is so different. So to be able to bring all that together, genders and sexuality, religion, and we're such a cosmopolitan part of the world now, New Zealand, that you've got different cultures in your office. So all of that lived experience by people is you've got to bring all of them into that leadership discussion in some way. Yes, you've got to make the decisions, you've got to make balance where there's difference and all those good things. But yeah, the corollary of all of that is that whilst it's not a solo game anymore, it's still a lonely one. Some days you're still just the only one sitting there having to make tough calls.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the word curious. I think it's a fantastic word, but it's also one, the way that you've put it about being curious to understand more, but also understand more of the context, that the whole thing. I think it's brilliant and what you've just shared there. If you and Bruce Beast, have you met Bruce?
I've touched him.
Springsteen at all? Oh,
I've touched him, yeah, no, and he high-fived me at a concert in Brisbane once.
Okay.
I saw him 5 times in 1 year. It was a bit of an overkill, but
he probably recognised you after that.
yeah,
Times,
I have this dream that he comes down and we have a cup of coffee and stuff, but never happens.
Well, that was my next question. I was just about to ask you. What a mind reader. So if you two are actually having a cup of coffee on a park bench, what would be one question you would love to ask him?
I think it's 75, how does he keep the drive alive? Like, I'm 52 and these days I wake up and it's pretty tough to get moving and do things. I should have mentioned earlier that alongside all the business work that I do, we also own a cafe and a hunting store. So I'm a licensed gun dealer. I can sell firearms to people in a hunting context.
Not in a cafe?
No, it's right next door to each other. So if you're ever in Taiepi, go and see the Brown Sugar Cafe. But
oh, wow.
yeah. So all of that stuff we do all that on the side as well with my wife, who's just fantastic. And I would ask Bruce what drives him still at 75, because he could tour the world on the Born in USA album or Born to Run album and just do the hits all the time, but he's not. He's still producing new music, still producing things. The E Street Band is still together. I don't know if you've ever been to his concerts, but my son went to a rap concert the other day. It was 1 hour in and out. Bruce Springsteen at 75 rocks on for 3 hours. And so I'd ask him what drives him. What keeps him going and what keeps him producing and creating. Yeah. So look, I think there is parallels to leadership in that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It'll be great to actually ask the question. Hey, so the show is called Leadership is Changing. When I say that title or that statement, what does it mean for Kelvyn?
Yeah, I think I've I don't want to repeat myself, but I think it is understanding that the ability to lead now is about bringing people to you. And we've just set a strategy for the Waikato. So, we've got $3 billion under management. We've got 32 staff, and we want to grow that business to $5 billion in the next 5 years. Now, that looks like a big ask, but actually when you break it down and you show people. But the trick, as we said before, when you develop this strategy, you've got to then bring the people to you to make it clear and concise and make it simple. Because if it's not simple and they can't understand it, then they're never going to buy into it. It has to be clear, like they have to be able to see the dot between what they do as a job and what we're trying to achieve. So it has to be really clear and it has to be concise. It's not a 40-page document. They're just pages that we put up, and putting on a page concept, it's a pretty big page, but people can see it and read it and understand it. And involving those people more and more, particularly younger people who have got great skills that I just don't have. I don't have the access to some of the AI technology that's coming. All of that stuff's changing so fast. So I just get hold of something and it feels like it's slipped out of my fingers and it's something new.
Yeah.
But I don't need to do that. I need to know that they've got that, and I need to ask them how what they know can apply to us delivering this outcome. And that's working great because it gives them some worth, it gives them some value. It means they bring something that I don't have. So that context of just growing what leadership is in the team and they're all contributing, I think is, again, I don't think that's necessarily new. I just think that it's becoming more and more apparent, particularly as technology and we become more global in that fight for talent, that people want to be engaged in that decision making. I remember years ago doing strategy work with a group, and some young people at the fifth tier have said, we want to have a say about that. And I remember saying to them, no, we do strategy, you do the work. And it was such a mistake. Like, they just never bought into it. They never did it. And I suddenly realized that they wanted to be. They were asking permission to come and be part of what we were doing. And I didn't let them. And it was just such a big mistake. So that engagement sort of horizontally across an organization and vertically up and down it is so important.
You know what? The thing that you're saying here, Kelvyn, as well, is that you talked about the purpose and having that strategy of the purpose, but also someone understanding the dot and understanding what they do on a daily basis, how it plays up into the larger picture of the purpose. And then on the other side, that you get them to go out and do what they're really good at, that side of things that you've just shared. I think that you said just there that that's not new stuff. That's stuff that's already been done. I actually think there's a lot of leaders who are actually struggling with that. And I'll tell you why. The younger generations are looking for that purpose. They're looking for that strong leadership to say, this is where we're going, but getting them involved and then it's giving them the opportunities to go off and do it. Where the leaders are going, I don't know where we're going. And they don't have that strong, clear purpose, vision, strategy. And the young ones are voting with their feet. They're like, I'm off to go and find another leader that does know what they're doing. And so I think a lot of people are struggling with it, even though there is a whole lot of people that are doing it very well.
Look, I think that's a really good point. A great example of that, and we're doing this in Surf Lifesaving. As I said, we're across the whole of the country. We've got 4 different regional offices and sub-offices all around the place, and there's staff. We've got executive staff in Auckland, Wellington and Tauranga, all around the place, as you do in the modern world. But what was happening is that people at the front line were making decisions with their customers, if you like, with their clients, but then they were being overturned further up the train and so therefore the people at the front line couldn't see that what they were doing was making any difference because it would all get changed. So now we've completely undone that. And one of our core values and our core messaging to the organisation is decision-making happens closer to the front line. Like, it's not in the head offices, they're about standards. They can set standards and parameters. But if you can make a decision that works for that client and customer at the front line, then make it. And you'll get it right. And trust is it is a high trust model. I can't run it from Hamilton, and our CEO can't run it purely from Auckland across 63 staff. So we need to trust that our people are well trained, we've got the right good systems, and if we believe that the strategy is right, trust them to make the right decision. And if they get it wrong, then we quality the rescue. We fix it. We focus on the fix. Then we can circle back around and see why it went wrong. And is it systems? Was it clarity? Was it expectation? Was it resource? Was it just a mistake? Making a mistake, as I said before, is part of the human experience. So we can't punish people for that. We need to help people for that.
Yeah, and learn from it.
100%. There was a great guy,
Yeah.
Tim Caversi. He was the head of organisational development for Newmont Mining in Australia. And he was like, people making mistakes and working under stress and making mistakes, that's actually a normal reaction to a stressful environment. And in a mining, given how it's all about utilisation, there's big targets, it's production, it's pretty full on, people are under stress a lot of the time, so mistakes do get made. And there's a difference between people making a mistake in that sort of environment to being incapable to do the job. That's a different thing. Right? Making mistakes, we can fix, we can learn, we can change things. Being incapable to do the job, okay, that's bad selection, that's bad skill sets, whatever that is. But too often people are making a mistake and then we go, oh, they can't do the job. Well, that's completely unfair and it's not correct. So that's a great part of leadership, that you can, actually allowing people to make mistakes and knowing that they won't get their ass kicked if a mistake has happened because we focus on the fix. That's a large part of building trust in the team. And, that hasn't always been in the case of some of the organisations I worked in, where you've come in and people are scared to make a mistake. And I think we see that. We talked briefly about local and central government in New Zealand. The bureaucracy are scared to make a mistake, so they don't make any decision. So therefore nothing happens, because if they do something and it's wrong or it makes a mistake, they are hung out to dry publicly or by the politician or whatever it is. Now, I always said I'd never do that. We fix it, we circle back around, we address it, we move on.
And if you don't first of all, it drives people nuts that a leader doesn't make a decision.
Yeah.
But the second thing is, when that local government guy, if they're not making a decision and not doing anything, what they're actually doing is they're actually going backwards, because everything else in the world's moving forward, right? So, as you said, the constant thing is change, and we know that for sure. And things seem to be getting a lot faster. So as the world gets faster and technology is driving a lot of it, and data and social and business, everything gets faster, what do you reckon a leader needs to be doing or be aware of to be successful in a fast-paced, changing world?
Oh, I think that's a really good question, because it's happening. It's happening to me now. My wife is a bit of a techno geek. She does all the system stuff for us. She runs all of our businesses behind the scenes. She's the CEO of our small family business. But even she's like, she feels like what she just grasped in terms of technology is slipping through her fingers again. But I come across, it was in a governance discussion where one of the panel speakers said, rather than chasing that, because there's so many things you could chase now. Is it AI? Is it technology use? Is it the development of software? Is it whatever it is you can be chasing just in technology? And then you've got things like working with people from different gender backgrounds. Then you've got, how do you work with Māori, Pacific Islanders, different cultures? Like, you can chase so many avenues And I think and they said, we didn't worry about it. In the end, we said, we know the questions we have to ask, that's important, but we don't have to be the expertise in the answer. And in fact, we talk about this a lot at Surf Lifesaving. There are people that we employ who have the answers. We just need to ask the right questions and make sure that we're quite open about what we don't know, so that people who do know can step forward and play a role for the organisation. And I think that's so true. Like India, in the old, and you'll remember this, before you had cell phones, you had fax papers, things weren't as instant. If someone wanted to get hold of you, they'd have to ring and leave a message, then you'd have to come back to the office and then get the bit of paper and decide when you call them. But now there's this thing about they want instant responses. And if you can't give them that, you don't have to be the person who knows, you just need to be able to put the right people in front of them to that. And I think that's probably been a little bit vulnerable, like saying, hey, I don't understand everything. I don't need to understand everything. I need to know what questions I need to ask, because I've got a clear strategy and objective for us, but I have got the right people in my organisation, and that's really key.
Yeah, excellent. Now, you running organisations and teams, and even whether it's the Surf Lifesaving, because you've got a board there that you work with, but also you've got volunteers there, but also even think about business side. If you change lens now and talk from an employee's perspective, do you think the employees' expectations of leaders have changed?
I don't think they've changed dramatically. I think they still want someone that sets that clear direction, that allows them to be really clear on what their performance needs to be and what their deliverables need to be. Whenever I've been in an organisation that hasn't had that, or where I'm unclear about what my boss wants me to do, then that makes for a really murky place to be in, because you do what you think is right, and then you find out you're completely off track, and then it all goes pear-shaped. So I think people still want some pretty basics, which is clear expectation about what their role is, how that role plays a direct line of sight between their role and what the organisation is trying to achieve and do, that they're given good resource, good skills, good tools to go and do the job, and they're given autonomy to do the job how they need to do it within very clear parameters. I don't think that's changed. I think what has changed is that kind of the hierarchical nature of leadership is very different. When I say when we were growing up, but there's very much this deference to the chairperson, the board members, the CEO, the executive, and it was very layered. There was the second tier executive, and then there was the third tier management, and that still exists in lots of organisations. But actually what we're seeing is not necessarily the flatness of the structure, but the ability for the leader to be able to relate to all of those people. And it goes back to the very first thing we talked about, walking in different worlds. That leadership has changed. And I think you need to be able to be a leader who can still set clear expectations. And part of that is being really clear about when things go wrong, you can say, hey, in this situation, this behaviour led to this impact, therefore we need to fix these things. So it's not just being a general nice person. It's actually saying, I can relate to you on many levels. I'm still the boss. I need to make decisions that sometimes you won't agree with, but I'm prepared to explain my rationale behind those decisions. And I think in the old days, the difference of leadership was, I've made a decision, it's unquestionable, this is how it is. Where I'll spend time with all of my staff saying, well, this is where we're going, this is why, and this is the basis to why I've either said no to that idea, or hey, we've taken that one and we've modified it a bit. Because I think if people understand the rationale to your thought process, they will accept the outcome. They may not agree with it, and I'm not asking them to agree, I'm asking them to accept it, and then get in behind it, get on the bus and then get into it. And I think taking that time I think in the old days that was seen as a weakness. You can't be seen as a weak leader and rationalise everything you do. But actually, if you want people to be part of an organisation, that's what they want. They want to be heard and listened to, and giving some time back to people to say that this is why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah. And that's not actually being weak. I think that's actually being strong, because you actually know what you're doing. Also, what you've just been sharing there, if I go back to one of the very first words you said in this interview, is that you talked about community. And that's, instead of being hierarchical, it's really you're building a community around you of those people that can get out there and do certain things, which is very important. Kelvyn, here's the last question, which is, well, it's not actually the last question, but it's a question that in the 7 questions I've got, which is, if you were to get your crystal ball out now and talk about the future, or think about the future, where do you see leadership being in 5 years?
I think it'll continue to be devolved. I think that you'll see good leaders having wider teams of leadership into different areas of speciality, and the big trick to that, of course, is being the leader that can walk across the bridge between each of those specialities, particularly in a multinational. I'm thinking here, the context here, I'm thinking about a big mining company. You've got all this technology, all this cultural requirement, ESG, sustainability, all these things that are coming. So be able to have people you can rely on who can take control of each of those sectors, and note that I didn't say silos, each of those sectors, and then be the glue across them all for everyone in the organisation. That's where leadership's going to be. So I'm a big believer that the time of the specialist generalist is coming, right? Like, I've always said that I'm a specialist. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a technical person. I'm not a scientist, but I can see the picture that is trying to be developed. I can help form that. I can help see the structure underneath it. And you talked about being the glue. I think if a leader can be more glue between all of these different expectations that are coming on organizations, that's where leadership will be. You need to be able to be that glue and hold people to account and say, hang on, you guys are shooting off on the wrong tangent, bring it back and keep them all together and have a larger team of what leadership is than, say, a team of 4 or 5 executives trying to run a whole organization.
Yeah. Kelvyn, it's been really amazing talking to you today. Thank you. If our listeners want to get hold of you, where should they go to?
Yeah, just jump on LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest place to find me, Kelvyn Eglington. Yeah, happy to take messages and they can find me there.
All right, we're going to put that link into the show notes, listeners. But Kelvyn, once again, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. So thank you so much for what you do. And also thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Dennis. Really enjoyed it. Thanks.
Excellent. Well, there you go, listeners. Wow. Are you building leadership, strategy, and community? Are you walking amongst many worlds to connect with people, to grow with them, and help them go to where they need to go to? Listen, articulate, and then set good expectations. That's very important. So the thing here is this. If you can be curious about the world that you operate in, then you can be a very strong leader for the future. Hey, thanks for joining us. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.